respectively by two-time Oscar winner Emma Stone and primetime Emmy nominee Nathan Fielder. They're a newlywed couple. They're struggling to transform the small community of Española, New Mexico, with their HGTV-like indie reality series, Philanthropy. But their efforts are complicated when a flawed reality TV producer, Dougie, played by co-creator Benny Safdie, sees an opportunity in their story. As the series unfolds, the couple find themselves caught in the series web of ethical and moral gray zones, all while trying to keep their relationships afloat. The Curse has already received a Golden Globe, WGA, and Indie Spirit nominations. Before I bring out today's guests, unfortunately, by the way, Emma Stone and Benny Safdie couldn't be here today due to production schedule. But before I bring out today's guests, here's a clip. Designer of The Curse, Katie Byron. Her credits include Don't Worry Darling and Zola. The star, co-creator, executive producer, writer, and director of The Curse, Mr. Nathan Fielder. So tell us about teaming up with Ben. Did you guys know each other for quite some time? And also fusing your styles together.
Yeah, Benny and I met, we were fans of each other's work, and we met each other, and then, this idea just kind of came about just when we were hanging out, and we were sort of convinced it couldn't really be a show. It was sort of just an inside joke for a bit, and then we kept talking about it, and then it turned into a show. But we both really, realism is really important to us, and we share like a view of what of how to build the world and all that. And that was a good, tone is so important to both of us, and I think that was like a good starting point. Sorry, was that a bad answer?
That was perfect. That was a great.
I was told that they're about to serve you guys lunch. And so, in the back of my head, I'm like, all these people are hungry. So I'm just thinking about it. Okay. Anyways, I'm thinking about the lunch. You guys are probably thinking about the lunch.
But you got a huge response here. They're very excited. I don't even know if it's pizza.
Well, some people are here for the food. Let's be real. But is the quality good? Is the quality of the food they're serving good? Yeah. Okay. Great. That's important.
No, but they're here.
You came all this way, and I hope lunch is just as good or better than breakfast.
No, but this is a great series. It's got this docu-style. There's the complexities between you and Emma. Was there something, that you and Benny were looking at? Like, did you look at these HGTV type of couples and you're like, we're going to call BS them?
Well, I don't know about BS. I think it's just like, we had this idea of, this. When someone says something to you, like, how real does it become? Is it the outside world that is doing things, or is it what's going on in your own head? And so that was like the jumping off point, I think, for the show, to have something like that where the viewer is like unsure if something's going on or it's just the characters building their own downfall. And then the HGTV thing, that was Benny's idea to kind of look at that world. So I think there's a lot you don't see in the shows, and everyone obviously knows, reality TV, a lot of it is faked. But we also live in a time where I think that everyone, feels the pressure to sort of tell their own story and who they are, maybe, which is weird because probably people didn't have to do that before social media and all that. So if you're not a storyteller, how do you tell your story? And that could drive you insane, I would think. Because, Whitney has to, is both resistant and leaning on this reality show producer to help tell this story, and it sort of like becomes this weird mishmash of like what she believes and what someone else sees in a person. And anyways, yeah, again, another bad answer, but you know, hopefully you get a sense of just from the vibe of what I'm saying, as opposed to like the exact words, because I think if this was quoted, this would sound really stupid. But
Very eloquent.
you know, if I could just come out here and tell a great story, I probably wouldn't be making stuff like that. So, anyways, this is my weakness. But you know, Katie's here, and she's a great speaker. Katie built. So you didn't see it in this one, but for those who've seen the show, there are these like Emma's character Whitney specializes in building these passive homes, these which are eco-friendly, net zero energy homes, and her homes had a mirror design, and we constructed these structures. Sorry, I'm taking over your job. Anyway.
Go ahead.
Anyways. But it's amazing. It's like amazing that we like, you know, build these. You asked a question about it, because I'm just.
Well, go into the big build of it, and in the conversations you have.
I'm equally as uncomfortable as me. Yeah, so we built 3 of these mirrored passive homes. They, well, 2 of them are built as exoskeletons on top of existing homes. So we found 2, we were looking for the neighborhood that this show could take place in. And there was 1 empty lot, and then there were 2 houses that felt like we could like basically build an exoskeleton on top of the houses, which required a lot of math and you know, really amazing engineering on behalf of our construction team. But these homes were built kind of in the same way that Doug Aitken built his mirrored house in the desert. We used the different materials, but in the same way where they're welded, steel constructed. Yeah, basically like exoskeletons and mounted with this mirrored plexiglass on top of them.
How long did it take to get from soup to nuts, drafting it to building?
Well, I think like actually when I was interviewed, you guys were like, can they be mirrored? And it was like, oh boy.
Yeah, that was like a last minute sort of addition. They weren't supposed to be at first mirrored.
And when you want a job, you just have to say yes. No, but I think it was one of those things where it was like, I saw the potential that it would be the coolest idea. And, you know, also just the idea of the house disappearing in the landscape, reflecting the neighborhood, also just like the complications that, actually when I was starting to come up with the idea of why maybe we shouldn't build the mirrored houses to Nathan and Benny, I would come and say like, well, they might catch the neighborhood on fire. And then Benny and Nathan were like, we'll put that in the script, that's amazing. And then there was another time where I was like, also like there's this issue with birds like hitting the homes. And then it was like, let's put that in the script, that's amazing. So it was like all of these issues, I was like, okay, we're really finding the show as we
But it did burn your car.
Oh yeah, so I...
You had a piece of, okay, you said it.
So when we were scouting, Nathan was like, can we get a piece of this plexiglass that we can just take everywhere so I can know what the world is reflecting? So I go stand in front of these houses with this piece of mirrored plexi, and I'd say like, you know, okay, this is what you'd see, this is what would be reflected. And so this piece of mirrored plexi lived in the back of my car, and within 4 hours it burned the roof of my car. So it was a rental, so it was production.
And even when the homes were actually constructed, we started to notice like this brown line that would cut like across a tree, across the ground. We were like, what is that? And it was the path of the sun every day. And so we had to cover the houses when like we would take off for shooting, and then
yeah, and then like we had cranes, construction guys would go up and then cover this entire house as if it was tented for termites, essentially. And this would have to happen like every single day. And then I remember when we were like shooting for a long period of time, I was like, okay, at what point what is it, 8 hours that things start to go crazy? Like, are we gonna, are we, you know, what? But luckily, it was all safe.
One thing Katie brought up that I thought was so interesting, like you saw in the clip the inside of the homes here, and Whitney, Emma's character, is like very controlling about how others use her home, and after she sells the home, she still wants to, because to hold the passive home certification, you can't have like an AC unit in, you can't do these things, and she feels that that's like disrespecting, and Katie wanted to do, like the way she constructed the insides of the homes were these built-in things where the buyer like couldn't put in their own shelf because the shelf was like in the wall. And explain your philosophy on that, because I thought that was so cool when you.
Yeah, I mean, there's that like hotshot architect move of like, I have this idea of how I want the house to be dressed. I know, like Alexander Gerard, who's also a big reference for us. He even dictated what type of cutlery would go into the kitchen. So it was like, oh my God, if Whitney created these homes, she'd be so specific. Like, this would, when she would stage them, the intention would be like, you buy exactly what she had. And her house was technically almost like a stage representation of like her ideal version of what this house is. So yeah, like the idea is that there's no real other place to put the bed. You know, it's only against that wall. There's only one type of couch that fits into that living room. And so yeah, the idea that like you can't change it. It always will be what it is.
So the other cool thing about the show is that you casted actual people that lived in the community. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, Benny and I were always like, you know, realism and being, because we were in this actual city of Espanola in New Mexico, which is about 30 minutes north of Santa Fe. And it's about, you know, it's like the locations that we're using the real names for a lot of them, and so we really wanted it to feel, our goal was basically, if you live in Espanola, people would be like, they pretty much got it good, hopefully. That was like our goal, like we wanted it to feel really authentic, so we wrote a script obviously, but you know, I went there a year in advance and like, you know, spent some time in the area and talked to a lot of people, and you know, then we wrote the script around those things to make sure it was accurate, and when we were there, when it came to casting, we'd find the location of, let's say, like a taco shop, and you know, there was a person in the script who worked there, but then there was someone who worked there, and we, you know, if it's a small part, we were sort of like, you know, do you want to do it to people, because we could never, in our imaginations, we could never be as accurate as like what the real people that were there. And you know, fortunately, the community was really like game to collaborate with us on it. And you know, that was the interesting thing. The element in the show too is that with these home flippers, you know, in these shows, you see these people come into a community often and impose their sort of will on it, and then like leave. And so we were sort of conscious too that we as like filmmakers are coming into this community, and even though it's temporary, like constructing these mirrored homes in the neighborhood. And so we sort of wanted that to be a part of the show when you're watching it, to be thinking about, you know, the level of realism and incorporating real people. And we even had people, you know how when you're shooting in an area, you might see like, it's like a mistake in movies where someone in the background will like look at the camera, and that's like, you know, because they're shooting in New York, and you're like, oh, that must be like a real person. Well, we actually had extras, we directed them to look at the camera, so it feels like, so you get the real feeling of, oh, they're really imposing. There's a lot of people in the show that are like looking at the camera, but we told them to do it, and like we're almost staging like they're the guy who happened to be in the room. So it feels like a mistake, and so the viewer will feel that like, oh my God, are they okay with this? Like, we wanted people to think about that, because that's what we were thinking about too. We were just really wanted to make sure we weren't like doing the thing that the characters were doing, even though we sort of are a little bit.
Yeah, it was really meta. I actually had to we had a consultant and an Indigenous artist worked with us as a consultant, and I had to approach them to sign the release. And it was like 2 weeks before we were shooting the release scene with Kara, and it was just there was a lot of meta stuff happening in the show where it was, we were all convinced it was a show within a show within a show. We actually were like waiting to find out that it was.
Oh, really? Seems like a terrible environment. I'm sorry.
Everything kept on lining up, like it was just like this, I mean.
Well, that's the thing, we were trying to be so accurate that we ended up, like Katie was saying, it's just like, if something actually happened that was different than what we thought, we were like, well, this is how they do things here, that's involved it. So then, yeah, there started to be like all these parallels in terms of.
Yeah, reality was like folding in on itself continually.
But you know, with them making a reality show and them being conscious of these things and us being conscious of these things, it's like, you can look at the characters and be like, well, these people are absurd, and obviously there's like, some of the stuff's like very exaggerated, but like, there's a part of, you know, these characters that is very relatable, where you sort of decide like, what's enough for you in terms of doing good, or the limits of your charity. Everyone has a limit to their charity, to how charitable they'll be. And so I think in the show, you get to see the characters like living on that line of like, when their generosity conflicts with their livelihoods and how they handle that. But yeah.
Have you received any phone calls from?
What am I?
Have you received any phone calls from HGTV with any notes?
Like, how would they know my number? Like they looked me up.
They call Showtime.
Yeah, they called. They were like, "Thank you so much for the exposure. Thank you for talking about our brand. We're always trying to get our name out there. We really appreciate everything we do." So yeah, I get calls all the time.
Showtime and A24's The Curse.